Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I tell you, it's rough, man. It's a rough world. Ken, did you witness that?
Kendrick, you didn't hear.
You didn't hear. I'm not going to call names because I don't want anyone to get offended or anything like that, right?
You might as well call like a shoe.
No, because I don't want the husband and all that to get bad.
He listens to this show. He has a very good sense of humor.
Okay, he has a good sense of humor?
A very good sense of humor.
If anyone come for me, I'm going to say, look, don't kill me. Kill Rogan Smith. So, Kush Pinder. I said to Rogan, because that's Rogan's friend. I said, well, I'll probably take her, we'll go out on some dates or whatever. I was just trying to be, friendly, okay?
This is an exchange for lessons.
For lessons.
Yes.
Because everything has some strengths. I was a string fella, okay? So I didn't, first of all, I didn't think she was married. That's number one.
Well, okay, yeah. I never mentioned, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't assume no one because you have children in this town. That don't mean nothing. So I said, well, no problem. Then I found out she was married. I said, well, that's not a problem. Fellas get roach, that's not a big deal.
Fellas get roach.
Then she told me, then Rogan told me,
I started telling the story.
Yeah,
I started telling the story about how her baby is heavy.
Yeah, as heavy as me and Ken put together, which is an insult to a child. and you did that. I didn't say that. And I said that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. Ken and I are not just regular guys. We're oversized.
Y'all like 6 feet, 5?
We're oversized people. Okay?
So you proceed to sit in my lap.
So I said, first of all, that's an absurd statement to say that a child of 1 year old weighs as much as me and Ken. I don't think that child weighs as much as my foot.
No, he is extremely heavy.
Anyway, so I said to you,
extremely heavy.
All right, let's prove it. Me and Ken, you lift for me and Ken.
Yeah, I
so
said
you
Ken
said
lift
that.
you.
So I said, so you'd have me sit on your lap. I sit on your lap. You couldn't handle it.
No, Jesus, I
don't
died.
I don't think you could even handle one buttock.
No, both killed me.
So anyway, I said fine, and we talked and we went on. So first I said, Kush child. So you showed me a child.
Yes.
So you said she is one of her last of the three children.
Yeah, this is our last child.
So I said very, very candidly, I don't want her no more. Hey, Ken, you know what I'm saying?
It even had nothing to do with her being married. It's about the fact that she has the kids.
I can't carry that load.
Because he could get roached.
No, but I can't carry that load.
You can't.
No, I'm not talking about
I know. The supporting them financially. Right.
I've been through that.
You own into that.
Ken, Tree, you know what I mean?
Can you miss this?
One is rough, man. But Tree? No. I finished with her. So I said, call her. So she says she in the bathtub with the children. That's the first thing, right?
So, you can hear them in the background.
Well, she said it.
I know, you can hear them.
So I said, look, I want to be as diplomatic as possible, especially since your children are nearby. And I said, listen, the whole thing about, me and you.
That's a wrap.
That's what I said.
A wrap.
I said,
you
never
off
mind.
The list?
I said, yeah. I don't want you no more. That's what I said. I don't want you no more. I said, you have to. And then she started begging.
And guess what? I can't even deny or say you lie about this. Kendrick, I can't believe you missed that.
No, let me do a timeout again now.
I can't believe you missed that.
Let me do a timeout again now, because
this
is humor. The husband called.
He called.
Okay, because this is jokes.
This is jokes.
Okay, but no, she started. I think the word is plea.
Hold on, let me
tell you something. What's the word plea?
Beg. Please sound too diplomatic. Begging. Mm-hmm. And I didn't expect that.
I don't know if she was begging, right? But she was trying to justify. But if I only could take the last two, come on.
Actually, what kind of mother? Getting rid of the firstborn so you can take the last two? You can support them easier.
Kush, boy, you shocked me.
Boy, Kush, I calling her son tonight. So your mom was doing away with you.
Can you do me a favor? Can you call the brother man?
Yeah,
because you need to make sure he knows this is all humor. Okay? I don't even like people named Pinder.
The woman, Pinder.
I don't even get the titles. Okay? All right? So,
what do you have against Pinder? What do you have against Pinder?
It's just because I'm just trying to justify the brother man. I ain't into it. Okay? You remember the soda? You remember the sodas? Pinder sodas?
No, I don't.
You don't remember Pinder sodas? Oh, yeah. They had
you?
What they had? Yeah, man.
See? Kendrick don't know either.
Remember, what the man was name?
I don't remember any Pinder.
Philip Pinder.
I know that name.
He was an MP.
Yes?
He had sodas.
Oh, okay. No, I don't remember no Pinder sodas.
Yeah, man. He had sodas.
No, but that was something I never would have expected that. I thought she would have kicked you to the curb so hard.
Well, see, I didn't know the whole story, and that's why you have to
kick her own child to the curb.
That's why you have to take your time because you don't know what you're getting, man.
The
You know, next
woman's
thing they come up, you know, you go on a nice little date, you go to a little dinner, everyone's smiling,
But
everyone's
she
looking.
hid the fact that she was married or had children.
No, but I did. Well, you hit it.
I didn't
You didn't
hide
tell me nothing about
anything.
no treat you're in.
Because first of all, nobody's taking you seriously about my friend going on a
Yes.
date with you. That's
Yes.
number one.
Yeah.
So I don't have
Well,
the
in that case, no one taking us serious about no golf then.
You already said we going. You gonna take us and treat us to the golf lessons. So would you trying to renege on that now?
No, because I thought it was a quid pro.
Ain't nobody was putting out for no golf lesson.
I thought it was a QPQ.
No. NO. Ain't nobody putting out for golf, boo boo.
Well, then I'd advise you. I try to don't even try.
Did you say buzz? Did you say buzz? If I buzz you?
If I was you, I wouldn't even try practice on swing it. You know?
Anyway, I in the middle of your arrangement. You got me for my lesson.
Well, what's okay? Well, now I finished with her. Now what's going on with you?
I too have 3 children.
No, that's a lie.
I do.
But you know why I don't have to? You don't have to worry about me.
What?
I don't want food with no liars. Okay? I don't want food with no
I
liars.
too have 3 kids. So that's
How
that.
this started too was because I had the child in the hand at the thing.
Because of course, actually, you know something?
Mm-hmm.
This
It's
is a
kinda
really
cool,
good
though.
photo. So Edward is in today's Tribune. This baby is so cute. This is a boy, right? It looks like a
I
little
don't
boy.
know. They said DJ, so I couldn't.
Well, yeah.
You know, I didn't.
some others name their
I
kids
didn't
after
know-
them too,
yeah, I
but
didn't
no.
know, yeah,
He's a
yeah.
cutie pie.
There's Mike. By the way, I had to cajole Mike to come
come?
today because he was going to do something with his family, but he consented because, you know, we were going to have Dionisio.
Yes.
But he got stranded in Freeport,
Oh,
you know, because they're
that's
doing
what
the
that-
assessment and all that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when you arrange these shows with the politician types,
You
be
running a
ready.
risk. Yeah.
So, Mike, get ready. You might be coming here by the next 3 to 4 weeks. Can he hear us?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah, I
okay.
see him smiling.
But anyway, so I want to thank him because I think we're going to have an interesting topic. By the way, I think I want to put, in terms of shows, our Monday show, I think I want to put that in the top 5, man.
Oh.
With the weather, the
I
meteorology.
got a lot of good feedback from
I
from
love
some
that
folks.
show. It was
nice.
just so good. And now I think
he was really good.
you know how you
yeah.
have this guy, Bill Nye, the science guy.
Oh, I love Bill Nye.
I think he's our science guy. That's
I love
what
to
I think.
test him a little bit
Yeah,
more.
I think. Well, once you start talking about
Because Bill
but
explains
heat
a
budget
lot
and stuff
of
like
stuff.
that.
Mhm.
I think
The heat
this
budget.
brother. I think he.
No, he was really good though.
Yeah.
Very
Jeff
informative.
Simmons from the.
Mhm.
And he's only the chief deputy.
The fun part is when he said, because as you know, and then me and you looked at each other like, no, we don't know. Like, you have to break this down. We don't know anything about meteorology.
Yeah, about the stirring currents and he had to break. You know, he had to break it down for us
What?
with the balloon. That's how we got it.
But you did, yes. Now that's when I got it. It was
Yeah,
a good little
yeah,
visual.
yeah,
but
yeah.
you went to the front of the class, so
What's
you did
that?
well. He said you to the front because you had to.
I enjoyed that stuff. It's at heart.
You know, you think you're the Met.
Well, no, at
Office
heart, you know what my thing
expert.
is, Rogan? At
What's
heart,
that?
I'm extremely inquisitive. You know what I mean? I'm extremely inquisitive. I seek information from, everywhere, That's why TV, I think, is great.
Some TV.
TV, well, yeah, I'm not watching All My Children or whatever the thing is. There's no,
What do you
knowledge in that.
What do you watch? Do you watch like National
I watch a
Geographic
lot of
and that?
PBS. You know what I watched?
You do like PBS.
Last night, you know what I watched? I was just overwhelmed. I watched Nova, and they were talking about, and I didn't even know this existed.
What's that?
They had a probe that people had been working on for 25 to 30 years that went to Saturn,
Okay.
and it had an end date, so that the end of the probe,
Yeah.
in order for them, it's crazy, in order for them not to contaminate the universe with microbes, they designed it so that it would burn in Saturn's atmosphere.
Really?
So the final,
That
it
is
literally
interesting.
it had a final destination or mission, and the final mission was literally it going into the Saturn's orbit and going through the atmosphere like how rockets would go through here
Yeah.
and burning up. That way the microbes and everything would be. But the whole thing about the Saturn and its rings and
Totally not against, but contrary to what your plan was originally to dump the garbage into outer space.
no, that's like I still plan to
You
do
still
it.
plan, so
Yeah,
now you
yeah.
could probably
But
put
my-
it close to Saturn and
excuse
let
me.
it
Excuse
burn
me.
off.
You see, this is why. You see, I can't communicate with a man.
What?
When they sent, I don't know if you know this, So don't
Watch this
ridicule it.
foolishness. Watch
Don't
this.
ridicule it because it's above your head, and just go with the flow.
What's that?
When they sent, and I forget the name, I think it was Capriccio or something, I forget the name of it, into space for Saturn 30 years ago, as you probably didn't realize, they didn't have your antibacterial soap. My garbage will be washed prior to dumping into space. Okay, so I got to worry about no microbes.
Okay, no problem. That's the dumbest plan I've ever heard.
Dumb? The dumbest when you say me and Candace the size of the baby. We'll be right back. Shading going on, but that's okay. We'll leave it at that because now we want to go across the line.
You know what? I'm so disappointed. I'm just so disappointed at all.
No. You see what I told you?
Disappointed.
I told you long ago.
You're the one person I would never do that to, ever.
Listen, of course you would.
No, never give you the satisfaction.
Yeah, you wouldn't give me the satisfaction, but you want to.
You better look at your baby.
That has nothing to do with me. And I reject all of them. Okay? All of them. Anyway, listen, I want to say that this is very serious stuff now. Well, we have a little fun and frivolity.
What are you, schizo? What are you
No, this is very serious
stuff.
This is about the hurricane shelter thing. We went down there yesterday, and I tell you, man, we see a lot of things on TV. You see people being displaced. Refugees, essentially, usually as a result of war or disease or famine or drought. But I don't know if any one of us really... the human being has the capacity to completely detach from things. So, people die every day, right? But unless you know someone who's died, you don't feel it, right? People, just like people who are displaced and refugees, we see about the Syrian refugees, and you see it, and you go, oh my, and but you don't feel it.
That reminds me of Hope, not to cut you off, but there was a statement that was on Hotel Rwanda, the movie.
Yeah.
Where the people said, well, they'll come and they'll help us. And the guy said, yeah, I believe them. The American people will eat dinner. They'll watch you and see what's happening and say, oh, my, and then go back to eating their dinner. Yeah,
maybe they're lucky because now we tired of the commercials where you could send a check. We're into elephants now. We move. First it was, people, then it was cats, then it's dogs, then it's tigers. I think we're onto elephants. So you just kind of get desensitized. And so... But, when I saw down at the NPCC, and these people obviously weren't hurt or injured, but I saw a sense of displacement, especially in the kids' eyes, because, this is a completely unfamiliar set of surroundings, right? And I don't know how they're what's the word I want to use? Processing it, okay? But it brings to home, if you've seen the pictures of like St. Thomas, St. John, Barbuda, those type of places. I mean, look, man, if that thing had not stayed where it stayed, today we could
that would have been us.
I mean, but look at Key West. Look at Key West. Look at the Keys. It kind of went around us, touched a piece of Bimini, did some damage there, and then went into the Keys, and then kind of went into all of Florida. And everyone out of light. I said to some friends who live in Florida, I said, see, y'all don't know how to live in non-civilization. See, we got generator. Because they are without power for like 4 or 5 days. Yeah. They don't know what to do. One person had a generator. You know what she told me? Oh, but last night we didn't have the air conditioning because, I don't know, we didn't know, can you sleep with the generator on?
Yeah.
I say if you can sleep with the generator
That's
on.
not reality for a lot of them.
I said of course you can. Well, what happens when it runs out of gas? I said, well, let it stop.
Then it's a wrap.
Stop. Just stop.
Is she serious?
Yes.
Yeah.
She said she heard other people with generators, but the box said you shouldn't leave it running at night. I said you shouldn't leave it running at night because they think that you might have no gas to put it. It's just crazy. They're completely displaced. So I just think everyone needs to, first of all, and we're going to be talking with Mike Alexio, and I know he brought Carlos with him. I forget Carlos's last name. He'll tell us. Because he was on with us before, about, how you can prepare for this. Because this is happening. They got 2 little disturbances out there now.
Yeah.
This is going to happen because why? We know. We know about the heat budget. We know that the Earth has to cool itself down. And that the more and more we have this global warming, which your man Trumpster denies even exists, the more that this Earth gets hot, these things are going to come more and more powerful.
Frequently, he said it man-made.
What was it called? Anthro something, Pelagic or something like that.
I don't remember the exact word.
Well, we could say anything that people think we know.
No.
Okay.
You can't.
Anthropologic. Okay, that's what it was. So it's serious stuff, and we've got to prepare. And the people who's been destroyed, we have to look at places like Ragged Island, Acklands. It presents an opportunity for how to build green, strong, not put up the same old structure that's going to just be wiped out again in the same old location.
Mm-hmm.
So
maybe he was talking about the houses on stilts that are close to the water, all those different stuff.
And Mike and those, when they were here last time, because of the problems out on the southern end of this island, we were talking about it. So we are.
Yeah, the majority of the people who are at the New Providence Community Center, which island are they from? All are from the southern. How many people would you estimate were there?
I would say about 100, and the majority of them seem to be from Acklands.
Okay.
So I don't know where the people from Ragged Island went. I think some of them might have gone home. I don't know where they went to. Maybe it was just to get their things and.
That's crazy, boy.
See. I don't know. Crooked Island wasn't that bad. Long Island wasn't that bad. I don't know what's happening in Bimini. We haven't really gotten full reports. They were because of tornado, and Freeport had a tornadic experience, as we say, Corton. What is it? What is it now called? Something tornadic, something activity or something. But Torcon, tornadic conditions. That's a new one on the Weather Channel. But so it's and so you just we gotta. So my thing is this: we have to help because it can come back on you. There's going to be a time when, whether we're here now or whether it's our kids or grandkids, we're going to need that help. We're going to need people to reach out and to assist us as much as we can because we're going to be. Imagine, Rogan,
reaching
you woke
out
up
from
tomorrow.
From other countries?
Well, I'm just talking to help. Just our fellow countrymen, and that's the danger of Nassau because we will require other countries because Ragged Island can't help us.
They can't help us. We could help the other islands.
Right.
The other islands can't really
assist. But it's imagine if you woke up tomorrow and all of your stuff, your life was gone. You're here, you got some clothes on your back, but everything is gone. It's
a scary thing to imagine, particularly if you're like an older Bahamian and you're retired. How do you start over? Again? Especially if you didn't have insurance to assist you along the way. Like that's the scary part.
Well, especially in a cosmopolitan area like here, at least in the family islands, and I'm not trying to diminish their value. Their life is simpler. Their acquisition of material goods is probably not as grotesque as ours. I use that word. So, to get them started again may be simpler because what they need is the capacity to have a shelter, to be able to go fishing or whatever they do. Their life is a lot simpler.
And there's a greater sense of community in the family islands where they're looking out for each other. Right. If I lose my home here in Nassau, I don't know where I could turn.
Sorry.
I come by you.
Yeah, sorry.
I come by
sorry,
you.
no, I fall, okay?
No, you're full.
I have some stuff in the other room.
Well, then take it out.
No, these are the things for the relief. But anyway, it's sobering, I should say, to see these folks. And here's the bad part that we have, and what's his name? One of the MSNBC news writers, someone said it. What happens a month from now, 2 months from now? It's kind of high on our mind.
High on the list, now because it's just
but
recent.
These people, see, we can live it now and feel like we're doing something now. But these people will be living this for like a year.
Yeah.
Okay, or more. I mean, there are places that, the U.S. Virgin Islands, there's always, at least they're lucky enough, they can go to the U.S. mainland.
Oh, that's true.
They can relocate. Okay? Barbuda, maybe they can go to Antigua. But, there's...
But even going to the States, yes, they have the mainland to go to, but it's still a process for them because
No, they're citizenens.
No, I'm not talking about citizenship.
You mean
I'm talking about rebuilding your life. You ain't going to just show up and say,
no,
they're going to be welcome arms right there for you to come stay. You see what I'm saying? It's still a rough transition.
It's rough.
Yeah.
And of course, even if you have family, I hear that there are scenarios here where people in the islands had family here who are, in fact, even willing to take them in. But check this out. The landlords didn't want them. The landlords say, only I only want two people living here.
Now I'm in the middle with that because I can certainly understand the landlord's position and I understand the need for them to house families. So I'm smack dab in the middle.
Yeah, there's a thing called emergency situations. See, it's one thing for me to be renting from you. You know what I mean? And I just want to pile people into my house because that's how I roll.
But let me tell you something.
But if it's a situation where I got to have 2 or 3 of my family members because their house got demolished in Ragged Island, it's a little cold.
Yeah, but let me tell you something. What's cold too? Okay? Letting them come inside the house and saying, okay, it's an emergency situation, and then their situations are never resolved, and so they end up staying in your house for however long until you decide to evict them. Then that's cold, that you have to throw them out on the street.
Well, I think, let me say this. Everyone who I spoke to, no exception, they don't want to be here. And they're not talking about like that in a kind of, pre-functionary. They can't handle this place. They don't want to be here. They've chosen to live in Ragged Island or Mayaguana or wherever they live because of the life that they have where they don't have to lock their cars, they don't have to worry about sirens, they don't have to worry about. That's where they want to be, and they are not anxious or not desirous of living here for any long period of time.
No, I certainly understand that. I'm just talking about in the sense of the landlord, from the landlord's perspective. It's difficult. Even in these types of circumstances, unless you're in that position, you wouldn't understand. But it's hard to then say to somebody, come and stay. Oh, your situation isn't resolved 6 months down the road, you got to go.
Well, I would definitely be saying that. See, that's where
you could say that, but then people will twist it and say
cold. No, that's not cold.
Let me say 6 months. Let me say 2 months.
Whatever. No, once it's resolved, I'm dealing with it. Once it's resolved, then there's no coldness because, see, they built your house in Ragged Island.
No.
You need to go back to that.
I'm talking about if it never gets resolved for them and they're staying in the house.
Well, I think they'll be resolved. Honestly, I do.
I think you have to look at both sides of these things.
So anyway, it's a tough situation. We were going to have Dionisio Diaglo on the show to talk about. And just you think about it, St. Thomas, right? They showed St. Thomas. It's completely, there's no trees. Or, you've seen how the hurricanes affect things around here. They kind of like burn the trees. So there's no vegetation, there's no trees. And their number one industry is tourism. Okay? Yeah. So they have no economy. Mm-hmm. I mean, if that happened, all of us would be without jobs. We'd be walking around.
It's already tough now with things slowing down.
But all of us would be without jobs.
Yep.
All. This is 70%. You go on Bay Street in the last, I don't know about today, but Monday, Tuesday.
What, empty?
No tourists.
Yeah.
0. And we can handle that because we know when they come in Wednesday. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. We know everything is intact.
Yeah.
It's just the ship didn't get here. Okay? And I think they came in today. Mm-hmm. Imagine when the ship ain't coming in at all. So we got to get our act together and do what we can do. We'll talk with Mike, Alexio, and Carlos in a few minutes about how we can, you think, and one of the things that Mike was a little concerned about is, when you get into this discussion of rebuilding and building green, the cost.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to talk to him about.
And there's got to be some kind of balance between the cost to build that way and the cost of losing everything. And here's the deal. So if you're going to build a mansion, we like your mansion with your columns, okay? Well, the reality is, can't you just downsize that and build for the same amount of money, but build something that makes sense? Because we got a lot of places around here with a lot of extra rooms and a lot of things going on that are unnecessary. That's the thing about the Bahamas, we got opportunity because we create such a lifestyle, right? That if we actually learn how to downsize,
I think Bahamians are already at that point where they're starting to downsize.
They're forced to. They're being forced to.
I remember it even with the vehicles. Even before we even get to the house, the vehicles. Everybody's be riding around here in like the big Escalades and these huge cars, and now what are they in the marches and the notes and all these smaller vehicles? It's more economical.
And I don't know. I think the people who can still go out and get a loan and get a big car. I think the
that
people who have the cars
away.
now are the people who just needed a car and they never had a car, so they buy in a smaller car. But the point I'm making is, we have to look at what we are doing now and see how we can downsize. Obviously, if you live in a big house now, you're not going to knock it down and start again, but
moving forward. But
moving forward.
I am interested in knowing about the costs, and maybe the costs to build more environmentally friendly homes is more upfront. You know what I mean? So you pay more upfront, and then later on you just reap the benefits.
You're not paying for electricity. You're not paying for water. You're not paying for cooling. That all sorts of things. So anyway, we'll take a break. We'll do the news.
Oh, before we go, let me just say a shout out to Demetrius Bastian, who I'm sure is waiting in his car to hear that, the DB, the big DB.
Okay. Do I know him?
Shout out to you, Demetrius. No, and he ain't having no children for you. So let's go to a break.
Thank goodness. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Ed Fields here along with, how shall I describe her? The wonderful Rogan Smith.
I was going to say, don't be mean.
The wonderful Rogan Smith.
You're being quite nice.
And, of course, Kendrick Williams, who's the silent one. And our guests this afternoon, and I must thank them because this is what you call short notice. I think it was around like 2 o'clock that I got on the phone to Mr. Mike Alexio. And I said, look, man, I'm desperate.
And he came.
Did I say that?
Only come when you're desperate.
Did I say that? Yeah, see, as soon as I said that, I realized that came out the wrong way.
Yes.
But I said, I need you to come, and he gave me some malarkey about dinner with his son or something like that. But anyway, I said, look, you can still go to dinner. I'll get you out of here and chat. What I didn't say is I'll pay for dinner.
Oh, thank you.
No, I'm not saying it either. I'm not saying it. And accompanying Mr. Alexia, who of course is an architect, is Carlos Palacios. And Carlos, are you an architect as well?
I'm a coastal engineer.
A coastal engineer. I like that because we're going to learn some more stuff today. Because we had on Jeff Simmons from the Met Office, and boy, we learned some stuff.
It
was illuminating.
I wish I heard it.
Yeah, it was good. You know about the heat budget?
The heat budget?
You don't know about that?
No.
You know
Don't
about
worry,
the heat
we
budget?
learned about it on Monday too.
Should we explain the heat budget
You
to
go
them?
ahead.
The heat budget is basically the Earth. There's a sun. The sun is warming up the Earth, and in order for the heat to be dispersed, it can be done in two ways: through currents and through hurricanes. And what hurricanes do is they take the heat from the oceans and from the surface, and they carry it up north to warm up north,
Right.
so that north doesn't go out of whack. So it's basically the
the
balancing of the temperature.
Right.
You didn't know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Anyway,
but
now
I
you
know,
know.
And don't feel bad about it because he just learned it.
Hurricanes are spawned in the Sahara, right?
You got that's correct. It's a disturbance in the Sahara coming off the coast of Africa,
Right.
and then the heat and of course, what causes spin? It's a magnetic force.
Coriolis.
There you go. See, you know something. You know. See, you know why? Because he in the coastal world, so you know that.
See, we switched. Once we got down to the water, I'm back with you.
That was good.
See, but this is. I find this now. I never thought I'd be enjoying this stuff, but it's fun stuff. Unfortunately, because the Earth doesn't care. And this, you would know this now. This is where we make the transition, the segue. The Earth doesn't care. You want a house on the coast. It's not It's not Earth's concern.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have decided that we'll build these big cities, big skyscrapers, just in Biscayne Bay. We're going to build those things on there.
Yeah.
And as if the hurricane should be punished or something.
Right.
So that's a segue into what do we have ahead of us. And the Prime Minister say we will rebuild Ragged Island and I suppose Salina Point in Acklands. And so why I asked Mike and Carlos to come on, and let me say this because we're into transparency.
What's that?
I said to Mike, I want you to come on, and in his reluctance he said, well, anyway, I can bring someone with me.
Well, an expert.
Yeah. So, but you're an architect. Talk to me about, and I guess let's talk to Carlos first about this whole coastal thing, because people, and I saw someone write online about this whole thing that get into the political socioeconomic thing about herding the people into the center of the island and leaving the coast for the foreigners to build on and take and not have access. How valid is it to build on the coast?
we can build, in terms of engineering, we can engineer a system where you can live anywhere.
Okay.
Will you want to pay the bill to build that system is the question.
Right.
But persons and human beings have survived for many years living along the coast.
But
Let's
they
remember,
kind of like a disposable building, right?
we've been there once again, there for a long time, but you have to accept the risk of what's involved.
Right.
And therefore, we have to evolve how we approach and design what we build. Because what we might have been able to get away with and survive 20 or 30 years ago before these mega storms that are at a higher frequency came along. Let's remember all of that.
Right.
Irma was record-setting.
Yeah.
It's the
and
highest.
Katia and with the one Jose right behind
All
it.
of them. And then Lee was
They got
somewhere
two-
behind
they got two
there.
disturbances now?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we've had a major storm every year for the past 3 years and spent hundreds of millions of dollars as a nation between borrowing and direct costs to deal with the repair. So we've established that this is the precedence, the timeline that they were in. So how do we respond to that? Do we now relocate portions or certain low-lying areas? And you mentioned Biscayne Bay. For example, most of Florida is the Everglades,
Coastal, yeah.
is wetlands. Most of Miami is reclaimed land from dredging. They filled in the mangroves, right? So Mother Nature had that as water before, and we made land.
Yeah.
Therefore, there are consequences when, like you said, Mother Nature does not care that you wanted to put a city
Or you want
where
to-
it had wetlands. And when it sends the water that it used to send into its wetlands, it now goes into your city.
Or you want to put a bridge from Miami to the Keys.
Exactly. When Mother Nature had
No bridge.
no bridge. So how do we respond to that?
Yeah.
And how do we invest and make sure that we protect ourselves? That's really
Well,
the
what
truth.
they did in Florida and a lot of the U.S. is they've developed zones, flood zones, and they set specific elevations that you have to build at. So if you want to build in such a flood zone, we know that's going to surge at 15 feet or whatever. You now have to build 16, 18 feet and start your house at that level.
Okay.
So a lot of architecture has developed with the under the house being used as nice gardens and nice covered areas.
Yeah, you
and
can put your
then
pool
you have-
table or something there that you don't care.
Yeah,
about
sure,
losing.
and nice outdoor furniture, and you could sit and catch the breeze, shaded, and take the steps up to your house.
Yeah.
So there's a price to pay because it costs more to
But
build
going back
higher.
to what
And I
you
brought
said-
I brought some examples of FEMA.
Approved.
And and you actually have to get a certificate certifying that you built to those grades. So you have to apply for a certificate.
So this is where they cross the line in a sense because it's mandatory.
It's mandatory.
Yeah, it's not like you choose to live at 2 feet and I don't mind if my house gets blown away. No, you're going to have to do this.
Well, because destruction of one person's house costs the entire population, and the hurricane in Houston, the water floods in Houston is going to cost us an insurance.
It's already gone up.
It's a global thing. It affects one place affects the whole world, the entire world.
Are our building codes sufficient considering this environment with the homes?
I think I personally think that we need some revisions of our codes.
And some additions.
And additions. Building higher at higher elevations. We do need changes to the code.
What about stilts? Having homes on stilts around
That's
the
what I was
coast.
telling you. You have to elevate your house.
Okay.
Some site-specific things. And Florida, and Mike was 100% right with that. It has something called a CCCL. That stands for Coastal Construction Control Line. Coastal Construction Control Line. What that means is around their whole state, they mapped these various flood conditions from hurricanes, etc. And they drew a line around their shoreline. If you live seaward of that line, you have to apply by these rules. So the regular building code applies for people on the inside. Let's call it upland, mainland, and everyone outside of that line You can choose to build there, but just know your house might cost twice to 3 times the guy who's on the other side of the line. And an example that Mike, when we were discussing it ahead, is there's a property, for example, where that line cuts your property. So there was an existing structure there. And if half of your house got destroyed in a storm, you would not be able to rebuild without following these new regulations.
Yes. You can't say
say
half on my
No. Yeah. And also, let's remember too now, everything that really affects you in a storm is debris. Wind traveling at 180 miles an hour isn't what kills you. It's the one little pebble in that wind. If it hits you, it could kill you like a bullet. Right. Same thing in water. Water rushing past you at 10 feet per second doesn't necessarily wash you down, but when you now throw tree limbs, bricks, things like that. So if you are next to me and you choose to build your house at a lower elevation and your piece of 2x4 comes into my house or into my family, you now affect me.
Right.
So no man is an island.
The thing about the cost, Rogan and I were talking about this off the air. You say it costs more, but it costs more based on what you want to build. So I was making an allusion, for instance, if you decide in normal circumstances you wanted to have a 8,000 square foot house, well, that's going to cost you X amount of money. Well, maybe now you need to thought, what is the utility of that? So maybe now you build a 4,500 square foot house on stilts, and maybe it's a similar cost, right?
Build smaller.
Yeah.
We are building houses too big.
Yeah, we got columns. I don't know. We think we're in the antebellum days. I see columns. They can't even shade you from the rain. It's so high.
They have their own weather system underneath them.
Yeah, we've gotten into building much too big houses, and the family grows, and the kids leave, and the parents and the house is running empty, and so our houses are way too big, and we could build. So
we have an opportunity to build smaller and to meet these standards.
You have to mandate it, I think. Yeah. So to mandate it, you have to make decisions of what codes you're going to adapt, what standards you want to set, and then you have to legislate it. So it's an economic factor associated with all that too. So.
Well, our good friend Larry Smith, I remember it was Joanne who was saying it, how they decided to downsize and then build a greenhouse.
I was their architect.
Well, what am I?
So we did a concrete structure with styrofoam insulation and solar panels, and they could live off grid completely.
And just comparatively, we don't want to say how wealthy Larry was, but comparatively speaking, if that was the downside, if it was a smaller home, okay, would that have been more expensive than say the average home that someone would have built a larger home?
Not really that much more expensive. A little bit more expensive, but not very much.
Not double or triple.
Larry Smith, of course, may rest in peace, right? So Larry was extremely pleased that his electricity bill was, I think, $5 or $10 a month.
Wow.
So which was the bare minimum, right?
Yeah.
And he used BEC power strictly to trickle charge the battery. He didn't have BEC into the house at all. He used BEC only to trickle charge the battery if the solar panels were not picking up sun.
Right.
And so he could really, if he had sun and it was not cloudy and sun, he could run completely the entire house with air conditioning.
On solar.
But what I was talking to you about earlier is with those types of houses, the costs come up front and then later on you reap the benefits. The problem is a lot of people just don't have the money to outfit their homes with solar panels to that degree.
Yeah, it's what you consider it is a business venture. You consider that if I go to the bank and borrow $30,000, I could pay it back in 5 years or 4 years, or so. It's a little business of your own. You're investing in yourself.
So you can actually get a more expensive loan if you think about that, Rogan, because you'll have more disposable income to pay it.
Yeah. So instead of paying BEC $400 or $500, he could have used that $500 to add to a bigger mortgage.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's a cultural shift in the way we approach things. I mean, we have to adapt. We have to think more long term. Because the current way we do things isn't going to take us over this hurdle of these more intense and more frequent storms. So, all across the board, from the materials we use, the locations we build, the elevations we build at, and prioritizing where our resources should go in terms of infrastructure so that it's done in a sustainable and green way.
It's an interesting thing that just kind of crossed my mind about Mother Nature and how we decided we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk to you about. I want to talk to you about this, how maybe nature may be forcing us back to nature. We'll be right back. We'll be right back. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Ed Fields here, along with Rogan Smith and Kendrick Williams. Our guests are Michael Lexio, architect laureate, and Carlos Palacios, who is the coastal engineer laureate. We've given them those titles. Once you come on our show, you're the laureate. Okay, that's how it works. You before we went, you talked about this cultural shift. Now, it always seems like we're so far behind on things because I've been in the Jacksonville area and places like this, the Keys, and of course, as they get destroyed, they get newer and better, right? You go into areas in Jacksonville on the dunes. You are not, for instance, I'm a golfer. If a ball goes onto the dune, you can't get it. You're not even allowed to walk on the dune. They have certain paths that you can traverse on the dune. You can't walk on it.
They build bridges over the dune.
Right. You're not allowed to even walk on it. Right. The houses are in that stilt mode.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. And they have these breakaway rooms almost kind of thing. Exactly. And it kind of reminds me of if the Arawaks and those were here, then the Lucayans, they would have built houses on the beach, but they were designed to wash away.
Yeah.
They just come and build it back. It doesn't cost them any money. Sure. But so will now this realization of a reality, I know that sounds kind of redundant, that this is going to happen. Okay? In theory, this could happen this year.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not like, 5 more years from now, okay?
Sure,
that this is going to happen. Will that kind of scare us into doing what we need to do, both legislatively and code-wise and culturally and mentality-wise?
It definitely has to be, the two have to play hand in hand. And it'll have to start with the next generation who will become the leaders who will be able to make sure that these things are followed through. So the same way we have the cultures of John Canoe and other things ingrained in who we are, we'll have to have the culture of hurricane preparedness and a certain level of responsiveness to our environment.
Yeah.
But now, so that's the two phases. One, the culture, which takes years to create, is what I'm saying. We can't wake up tomorrow and change our culture. No. And all of a sudden people have a deep passion and understanding of, we need to adapt immediately. But what we can do is guide that through legislations, rules, and code adaptation that cover these things. So restrictions maybe in terms of what you can build. Maybe a beach cabana, some type of sacrificial structure would be accepted in certain high risk. And once again, we can do hazard mapping to understand the hazards and the risks associated. If we determine an area is low-lying, high risk, then maybe you can only build a structure that's not inhabitable on a daily basis. Right. You go out, you could go for your little barbecue, you maybe spend, exactly. Yeah. But your regular 4,000, 5,000 square foot house needs to be set back in an area that's not within certain protective areas.
In saying that, you've also got to look at the fact that what exists, right? So look at Houston. Houston is sinking, okay? And it's kind of unrealistic to think that, everyone's going to, I don't know what they're going to do. They have to live it out. But can we get to a point of real forward thinking? In the case of, for instance, like a place like Ragged Island, where essentially you can almost start a new community with all of these things into consideration. But when you look at Nassau and say, okay, Nassau, we can't even evacuate. We've got immigration issues. We've got all kinds of issues. We can't just go to another country, and we can't go to Ragged Island. Okay, so do we start looking at how we zone places like Andros and Abaco so that if Nassau gets to the point of being destroyed, we can start to move the economy slowly there and put in codes that you're starting from scratch essentially in these kind of virgin areas, aren't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Andros has been master planned, by the way, under an IDB grant. Over the last 2 years, work was done on Andros specifically to create it into an eco-centric island and city.
It take hurricanes into consideration?
From what I understand, it did.
Yeah.
It did, yeah.
Yeah, and a bit more to that, we were talking about evacuating people, and this time there were the remote islands that were sparsely populated. It was easy to send a few planes down and bring them up. But if it's a larger island, let's say like Great Exuma, you can't. Or if the hurricane, we talked about the hurricane at one point was coming right through the entire Bahamas. Right. They had it targeted to go right through. We can't. Where are we going to go? So really planning some
shelter.
Some shelters in safe, elevated land and built to international standards. I brought a copy here just to show you that they exist. And
can you shelter 300,000 people?
Well, I mean, New Providence has I think some good elevation and some houses that I think are in safe areas.
And the Cat 5, they don't care about elevation. Cat 5s.
No, the wind. You won't get the water problem, but the wind. And some of them, I think, are well built that would take it and people would survive. But there would be people that would need to go to shelters for sure.
Yeah.
And so if Ragged Island had a good shelter, they might have been able to go there and not have to be flown over.
I don't know if you've done the analysis, Mike, but what would a Cat 5 have done to this island?
Well, as Carlos mentioned in the paper the other day, nobody really knows. It's all bets are off. I mean, when you mention, we didn't talk about Cat 5. We don't talk about what happened.
And that was more like a Cat 6.
Because it's like everything's destroyed, you might as well just leave. So that's really the answer.
You have to look at the definition of a Category 5, the Saffir-Simpson scale, which is what we're saying when we say Cat 5, is even well-built structures can expect catastrophic damage. So notice the well-built structures. That means you've built it to code, and our wind standard here is 180 miles an hour. But let's remember now, 180 miles an hour with 225 mile an hour gusts.
Now, Category 5
is what Irma was.
At 150 or 157.
Yeah.
7. And so we were getting 185 with 225
gusts. So, I mean, honestly, I'm a structural engineer as well. All bets are off.
We're talking about a high Category 5.
Yeah. It was record setting. It was the highest sustained winds of any storm in the history of our measured system in this side of the world.
And there's no reason to believe that it can happen more frequently and that it can't be higher.
More intense. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's daunting,
hurricanes.
Man.
We've had 28 and 29, and go back in different places you'll find Category 5 hurricanes, but this one lasted at Category 5 level longer than any other hurricane.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, what is the way forward, gentlemen? That was a question that Mike put to me. What is, if you guys are because this is about structure. This isn't about, politics, or this is about how do we withstand this stuff. If you were sitting in a room with, 3 or 4 other, laureates in structural engineering, coastal engineering, architecture, coastal design, all these sorts of things, what would you say to the government of the Bahamas that they needed to do now? And by the way, before I do that, we haven't even talked about surge.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, because that one, I didn't know about surge till about 4 or 5 years ago. I think Katrina taught us about surge.
I read the other day that in 1928 hurricane, there was in Lake Okeechobee was such a surge that it broke through the levees and it killed 2,500 people Okeechobee, Lake Okeechobee. We're not talking about the sea. We're talking about the lake.
The lake had a surge?
The lake had a surge and killed
because of the hurricane.
2,500 people in 1928.
I mean, did you see the water rushing down Brickell Avenue? Did you see the pictures of that?
River.
No.
It was crazy. It was like a rapids.
There's rapids.
Yeah. But so if you had your, you had the button, what would be the immediate? Because this is something that requires immediate and long term because you're buying time, right? What would you do?
People want to go back to their home, and they got a wall down. They have a plywood missing from the roof. The shingles are gone. They want to fix it and get back to the house. And so there's that immediate want and desire, and then there's the long term. Are we going to put the infrastructure back, or are we going to put the infrastructure somewhere else? These are political, economic, urban design, the coastal. You need to get some team, a group together to decide how the legislation's going to be put in place. How it's.
And I would add this, and I agree. It's definitely many stakeholders, and of course the people from the islands as well, because this is their home, right? My grandmother's from Hard Hill, Acklands, and my father and grandparents and everyone, okay? Hard Hill, Acklands.
I don't want to go there.
That's a real place, all right? And all of my dad's side is from Inagua. So in the heart of a lot of this discussion, right? A lot of those people who are on the plains were my cousins who were evacuating from those islands. And the truth is, if your heritage is a part of where you are, people say, well, where are you from? Are you from Inagua? Oh, that's the island they had to abandon because of the hurricanes, right? Like long term. It's very challenging to ask people to leave everything that they've become a part of. I mean, I have generation property in Inagua. For someone to tell me a part of the it's not there anymore. No, Inagua's good. But to tell me that, I can't ever build there or go back there, it's a major social challenge, right? So, and that's why it can't only be the technocrats in the conversation, the architects and engineers, while we play a major part of it. It's the social side.
If you look at places like in Louisiana, right? I think it's Louisiana, places like that, flood zones.
Right.
They had to move whole towns.
Oh, yeah.
Now, obviously, why they had to do it wasn't really much discussion. The water was literally coming up.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so it's like you can't get to your house.
Yeah,
okay?
at some point you have to abandon it. I mean,
why wait? So you're saying that the human dilemma is such that you have to wait till it's that point?
I would say this. We have to put incentives in place. So relocation incentives. You have young persons who are coming back to the islands. If you say, listen here, rather than spending all that money, 30, 40 grand to buy this lot, I will give you an acre of crown land in this other area that's higher, right? That
on
the same island, right? Let's remember now, Ragged Island is a relatively high island. Ragged Island is not as low as most of our islands.
You've been to Ragged Island?
I've been to Ragged many times. I worked on.
You've been to Ragged Island?
Never.
Yep. Okay.
Gunpoint Harbor on Ragged Island is a project that our firm worked on. Okay. So we actually had a resident engineer down there. So Ragged Island is not as low as many of the islands.
How high is it?
I don't know the top of probably anywhere from 20 to 50 feet.
So that's high.
It's high. It's a high island. So now most of the damage was from wind and flooding from rain. You see,
that much rain, eh?
Oh, it was an intense
So you need
storm.
to put drainage and you need to build strong.
That's what it is. And remember, our houses are built 20, 30, 40 years ago when Mother Nature wasn't what it is today.
Well,
let's look at the code back then as well. We're talking 180 miles an hour to something you build in 2017 is that standard. What was it 30 years ago? Right? It wouldn't have been.
Just try together.
Well, I didn't go to the islands, but looking at the newspaper, the damage is somebody's building cheap with wood and T111 siding or they're old houses with rubble masonry, rubble walls. So that seems to be where the damage is. If you set the code and set the standard of what you need to replace it with, and if you have elevated property, I think you can.
I mean, that's high elevation. I mean, you're hearing about a 20-something foot surge at the most in that storm. That's Cat 5. If you're at 50 feet elevation, you're in good shape. So okay. But Nassau ain't 50 feet.
Parts of it. The northern shoreline is high. The southern shoreline is all flat. And I did extensive studies after Matthew, actually, and we're very susceptible to a lot of storm surge on the southern shoreline. The southern belt, from the western tip all the way to the eastern tip.
So from like where? From, like, say, Prince Charles?
So basically from Yamacraw straight to the other end, down by Clifton, that area, before it gets higher
where's
again.
Where's the line? Where, like, say...
so the line goes from let's say, around the area of Adelaide. Right. You know, all of Adelaide is low-lying, and continues along.
So, but where does it start to elevate? Like you get
different. You get if you drive along.
There's contours.
Contours.
So all this cutting through hills. You know, like if you drive down East-West Highway, for instance, right? East Street goes through the hills. So that now has essentially breached the barrier.
It has.
Correct?
Well, it has.
But that is higher up. But it has.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's not going to allow that much water in.
It's not going to come that far up, you think? Okay.
The damage will be on the coastline and the lower areas. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think I mentioned this last time we were here. After the 29 hurricane, I was told that at the 29 hurricane, seawater came up all the way from the south all the way to Fox Hill Circle from the south. So I mean that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
That's imagine nobody lived all the way from Yamacraw.
And those were all farmland. That was all farmland back then. Now it's all residential.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that we're not even adding to this conversation is climate change and sea level rise. So sea levels are also getting
so
higher.
We're getting lower.
So exactly. So relatively, we're here, and the water's coming up around us.
Right.
So and just what's projected for the next 100 years is 3 feet of sea level rise, which adds to the storm surge, adds to the waves, adds to all of that.
So you mean to tell me, and I'm just going to pick an area, let's say Treasure Cove, or what's that area, Yamacraw Estates, that when people were building in those areas, the code didn't foresee you're living in a low-lying area. You need to build at least 4 to 5 feet up from the.
No, Treasure Cove had some code requirements, and they did build up a bit. So they wouldn't take the 20-foot surge, but they did fairly well in Hurricane Matthew.
And we do environmental impact assessments for large projects, which often require storm surge modeling to establish the minimum floor elevation. So many of the large developments, we did it for Bahama, Albany did it, most of these places. I mean, a lot of the properties on Ocean Club, etc. You have to look specifically at that location in order to get your subdivision approval because it's a part of the environmental impact assessment. So it's done, but we're talking now on a national level because the people in Ragged Island wouldn't have had it done on their island. That's the point. The people in Nagua wouldn't. So we need a nationwide assessment, which can easily be done. And we have the local expertise here to do it that assesses the storm surge, hazards, etc. So people are aware. So if you choose to live here and you choose to stay, it's on you.
Okay. We're going to come right back. We're going to take a break. We'll be in for our last segment. I want to ask you about what people can do after their home was destroyed. How can they remediate so that they can build in the same spot and protect against the problem they have? We'll be right back. Yeah, before... The oil. This is Ed Fields here, along with Rogan Smith, and our guests are Mike Alexio and Carlos Palacios. Just real briefly, did and do the oil rigs survive?
They moved them. They often moved
the oil rigs.
Yeah.
I thought they would drill into the ground.
Yeah, they shut the valves down and moved them under certain conditions.
So they're just floating things?
Oh yeah, they're floating. They're in thousands of feet of water. Thousands of feet of water.
And they float and stay upright.
Oh, yeah. They have massive ballasts under them.
And see, this is why I watch the PBS, because I want to watch how they build one of them next. Okay? I already covered
in certain depths, obviously, they can mount to the seabed. But the ones that you see in the Gulf, they're in like 6, 7, 8,000 feet of water. You can't attach to the sea. They also have bridges, for example, that connect Africa to Asia that have floating piers.
Yeah.
So the piers don't go to the ground.
Yeah. We could figure out some things.
We could build a bridge to Florida, if you want it.
Let's do that because we can need to evacuate. We can need to evacuate,
we
man.
just go to Centreville Hill.
Yeah, everyone go to the Z-Nest. Listen, the question I ask in terms of hope, because we're an island. We're not only an island, but we're an island nation. And so things like, even if we decided, we saw the flight, the stuff coming in 3 weeks ahead because we're now tracking storms 3 weeks as soon as they come off of Bear Day, that we want to get on a plane. We have immigration issues, so not everyone can go. When that surge happens and those homes in the south, the Pinewood Gardens, the Yamacraws, those areas are damaged severely, is there not a way that if they are damaged severely, you can say, okay, I'm not going to lose my land. I can't afford another piece of land. What can I do, assuming I'm properly insured, to build in that same spot?
Well, it depends how severe. If you're major damage, it would be wise to essentially you have to rebuild your house. It would be wise to rebuild and elevate. And a way to do that would be to use the walls and the foundations that you have and take the roof off and put a slab and build your house on top of that. So I mean that's essentially rebuilding completely. But I guess if you have insurance, you would best use the money to elevate your house. Right. Is what I could say.
Because we don't have we're trapped. So, you have to, I think one of the things I wanted to maybe get you to kind of enunciate is we should be working on ideas as we speak to deal with this, right? So that when this stuff happens, we have the capacity to make the adjustment. We can't go anywhere. I certainly, if my house is destroyed, I can't go buy another house. I can't go buy another piece of property. We have to be able to adjust. Are people in this country, like I assume in other countries, working on looking at the various scenarios? Because there's only going to be so many various scenarios, right? You're going to be south, and you're going to be this. That say, okay, this is what we do. This is the kind of package we can put together. This is the kind of cost structure we can apply to this. We can value engineer. Are people working on that?
And FEMA, for example, has documents that guide how coastal construction should happen within these high-risk areas. Once again, when we talk about the hazard map,
they're mandated. So
they're guides of how it should be,
but
which
that's
are then
new construction.
Which are then followed by laws. So, but they also dictate that in the condition, once again, that you're in these areas that we talked about within that construction control line, if your structure is lost, you now have to rebuild to these new standards. Yes. So you can't just repair, in other words. Mm-hmm. So if your roof blew off and storm surge came through your house, you can't just put on a coat of paint, put a new roof on, and let's move back in. Because your area, when you built it, remember, our houses aren't just built today.
Right.
When you built it 25 years ago, this was acceptable. Right. This code was in place. Right. These storms weren't what they are now. Mm-hmm. But as of today and moving forward, this is the standard. So you need to be at this height, etc. And we also probably need to look at areas that have to have restricted covenants in terms of no build.
Yeah.
So, okay, you live here now, you're grandfathered in. You've been here before. Mm-hmm. We're not going to take old Bala and Aunt Titta and kick them out and send them out.
Titta,
but what we'll do is we'll say, in order to get your new building permit for the new lot that just got cleared, you have to build to this standard. Right. Because what's currently there can't work moving forward.
And, it might be in the interest of the country to allocate Crown land to and offer it and incentivize people to make a choice to move.
Well, and the other thing too, and I don't know because I know that duties are coming off a lot of things, et cetera, especially building materials. But when you build with duty. So, you talk about, again, the opportunities and the value engineering that you can involve. if you're going to have to rebuild, and it's as a result of a hurricane or an emergency situation, I mean, obviously things like lifting and removing duties allow you to now have some cost saving that can put into these remediation, into these remediation
and being
issues.
Proactive with it, being proactive. So to say, well, if you're going to renovate your house and you're within one of these identified high-risk areas, then we'll give you the same duty incentives, even though your house has not been destroyed yet. But we understand you're going to remodel or you just sold it, and therefore the person's going to renovate. But here's the same incentives because the risk is going to come, whether we do it after the storm happens or before. And we need to be better prepared ahead of time, more proactive.
What areas, just coming off of something you said earlier, have you identified in New Providence that perhaps should have been declared no-build zones?
So a lot of the very low-lying southern coast is areas where the minimum elevation needs to be higher. So right now our building codes say that your floor elevation should be 5 feet above the crown of the road, right? So 5 feet above the crown of the road, there's a couple steps up. That is just a blanket nationwide thing.
Yeah.
But what we're saying is we need to adapt. So in a low-lying area, such as some of those southern areas, it might need to be 7 feet. It might need to be 10 feet. It might need to be 15 feet, right? Now, up on top of East Street Hill, where there's no storm surge up there, you could be at the regular status quo.
Right.
Exactly. But we have to identify the special conditions because it's not a one-size-fit-all, and these storms aren't going to see it that way.
And the surges from low water. So the south of New Providence is shallow water. The surge coming off of shallow water is much bigger than the surge coming from the ocean.
Why is that?
So the north side is on the ocean side, and because it's more space for the water to go to, and the shallow water is it's less space for.
Wow.
I would have thought that the shallow water you only can get a ripple.
No, you get a bigger surge, like in tsunami. You get a bigger.
So it sucks out, and then it comes back in big.
You saw the pictures in Long Island. The drawdown.
They're lucky that didn't come back. Why didn't that come back fast?
It doesn't always, but it can. They were lucky because it can come back very quickly, and that's the drawdown. So water's rising somewhere else, and it's going down somewhere, but that water's going to come back
fast is because the hurricane was moving away. I think.
I see.
Remember the hurricane did slow down as well. Remember, it's going like 16 miles an hour, and then it slowed down to like about 9 or so.
Yeah,
so it did slow down a bit.
I find, and again, to try to help people because one of the things that freaks me out is the wait, okay? And there's a lot of waiting going on. We're waiting to see the hurricane as it moves toward us. There's people who are waiting daily for a bad rain or a bad storm that they could be flooded. You know what I'm saying? It's knowing that, and especially if you had it before, right? So you live in Pinewood Gardens, you've had floods with heavy rains. So as soon as you see rain, it's a semi-panic.
Right.
Okay.
Right,
so the way to mediate or to mitigate that is to see how you can resolve it. And people have tried all kinds of things. And the interesting thing would be to find out how you go into an area like a Pinewood Garden and say, how do we allow people to say refinance their mortgage? Right? So that they can change how their structure is without, you got to be inventive, right? So if they have a 20-year mortgage and they paid off all but 5 or 10 years, how do we now extend that another 10 years and allow them to pay the same payment to remodel that home so that they would not have to live with that fear? To me, it would be worth it to me to spend those extra 10 years at the same rate I'm paying, assuming I have a job for that period of time, rather than wait around in fear that every hurricane season I could be destroyed or wiped out, or every rainy season I could be flooded.
Yeah. You're talking about very complex issues. I mean, somebody who has doesn't want to extend a mortgage. They've worked all their lives. They think they're getting to the end of their mortgage, and they live in fear, and those are complex issues.
Right. But you just offer these options. It's not you can't mandate it.
People will tend to do things if they are incentivized. So then of course at some point the structure would become unusable. So then at that point you say, well, the new code applies, and you have to. So it's I guess stuff like that will happen over time, but how to mandate it? I mean, I do think we need to have.
But you could mandate the existing code. You can change that code and make that mandatory for new build.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is happening with that? I mean, you were on the show last year, and in fact, if I recall, you were even a little apprehensive because, getting into that realm of saying we have to do this can become very political, right? But have we made a step from Joaquin to Matthew to now in terms of revising codes? It's a long period of time. It's 24 months.
Well, we haven't looked at the specifics as a nation on how we are going to deal with these types of new storm systems. Not a study that I have seen. But, for example, we worked last year on the Integrated Coastal Zone Management Policy Framework. That's just a fancy way of saying looking at everything in terms of legislation, economics, environmental factors, etc., that affect everything we do in the coastal environment, which is the areas we're talking about: floods, beaches, wetlands, homes, everything. And how can we revamp that? That was a policy framework document that our firm prepared with our team, once again funded by the IDB, and was presented to the government in order to become legislation, so that we can then. Other countries are way ahead of us, as we discussed there.
Yeah.
So Barbados has done it for 25 years.
That hasn't been made public.
Well, I can't speak to that side of it, but what I can say is that we have to start to slowly change our legislation and policies to what is currently in front of us today.
So where's what moves government, right? I mean, obviously you either have an enlightened government or it has to be forced, right? So all around us, whether it's in the Keys in Florida or to the south of us in the Caribbean, people are contemplating this stuff and enacting legislation to deal with it. What are we doing?
Well, the conversation just seriously started now that we've had 3 storms back to back.
Okay, so 3 is on.
But before that, we were cool. Right? We were good. I mean, we pray, and if the storm doesn't come, we're good. Yeah. But now we're getting a little more nervous.
I mean, I see where Dr. Minnis is saying for the first time we're going to have a look at mandatory evacuation, which, by the way, let me clear up with everyone. It doesn't mean the police come in and move you out. It means that you have to get a Sharpie and put your name and national insurance code on your arm. So if you don't want to move, but we ain't coming to rescue you,
no.
You don't exist.
Yeah.
You're dead to us.
Yeah.
No risk.
Yeah, no risk.
No, but I think we need to start coming up with a plan and getting all the stakeholders together. Sorry, excuse me. Go ahead. Sorry.
Have some water.
And using emerging technologies and things like that as well, right? Because a lot has changed. I mean, in terms of how we can better plan our country. Our firm, for example, uses drones to map most of our work, right? So we can rapidly do things that before it would have taken months to do.
Right.
We can literally do in a week, right? We can use up-to-date satellite imagery, right, to do assessments that before didn't exist. You had to fly over in a plane. It would cost you $30,000 to rent a plane and fly around a whole island all day. So what I'm saying is it's easier to do things now. We can collect data. We can assess things. And it's just making sure that we take it seriously because other things dominate the conversation. Let's be real. Education, crime. We have a lot of social and other challenges in this country. And we have a limited amount of financial resources. But after these storms, I challenge anyone to find something we've spent more money on than these hurricane hundreds of millions of dollars in the last 3 years.
And if we're wiped out like St. Thomas, education no matter. The school gone.
Exactly. So the conversation is getting real now.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like if we plan it right, we can then use our youth to rebuild the infrastructure and use their talents or create the talent to then channel it in the right direction.
I'll leave you with one last thing. We're building all along the coast. There's construction all along. Are you convinced that those buildings, those new buildings, say post Joaquin, let's use that, are built to withstand, very strong storms? I mean, I'd like to think that the 5s are going to be rare, but I don't see any evidence that that's going to be the case. I have a feeling we're going to be probably in our lifetime revamping the scale. You know what I'm saying? I think we could be up to bucket 7.
We were at 150. The code was 150 miles an hour wind, and now the code is 180, 80.
Yeah, 180, yeah, in terms of wind speed design.
And so I think eventually our code will have to go up to 200 miles an hour. And so, again, for the buildings that we have...
You need some metal.
For the buildings that we have up that we say are good buildings, they've not been tested at 185 to 200. And but I went to Abaco, Spanish Wells...
after Andrew?
After Andrew, yes, and there were structures there that's wooden structures that were fine. They had no damage whatsoever.
Those weren't on the coast or anything. Those were
the whole of Spanish Wells is the coast.
The thing about it is, in the old days, they built small, so that they weren't so susceptible to the wind, and they were boat builders, so they built their houses like they would build a boat.
Okay, like joints.
And they would always elevate it so the water would go underneath. So we can build to withstand. We can.
Yeah. I have a roof, and I don't know how to describe this, and I was talking to my good friend Raj, you know Raj, who, when the roof, you know, what do you call this when the roof is what do you call that kind of roof? You know, a pitch roof, right? And then in the front of the pitch, you know, where the concrete would normally be, it has a vent. Like a triangle vent on both sides. Yeah. So he says to me that actually, it freaked me out that wind would get in. He goes, no, that's actually good because now the pressure doesn't build up. The wind can go through. That's how they used to build the old houses. Yeah. They knew what they were doing back then, didn't they? Why did we lose that?
Well,
you know, was it just cost?
All the houses were elevated because you'd always walk up the steps to the porch.
Yeah, I mean, why did we lose that? Was it just cost?
Yes, people
Style?
building at code said you had to build 6 inches above the crown of the road, and
so they bring it down. Yeah.
So,
right. Well, listen, gentlemen, thank you very much. I think it's enlightening that people realize that. I think, you know what? If anyone's going to build a house now, I think they think in hurricanes now. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, when you build a house and you build it at ground level, whatever level you build it at, you cannot lift that house up. It's done. It's there.
Yeah.
And so either you're going to rebuild it or you might as well build it at the right elevation to start.
And it costs us whether we do it now or later. Yeah. That's the thing. I mean, it costs us more as a country to come back and rebuild these people's houses rather than setting certain standards in order to. It'll cost us a little more, but once again, if we could save 10 to 20% on what we're spending right now on rebuilding after these storms, that's a lot of money. That's tens of millions of dollars.
Chama, we got to go. Mike, I really want to thank you. I owe you dinner. And Carlos,
do I get a dinner as well?
No, he drug you along. He has to pay for your dinner.
He dragged me.
But you're his resident expert, so you got to take care of
He's the expert.
Yeah. I'm gonna ask Carlos something right now. I'm finishing this show.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen.